Well, just weeks after the Department of Justice announced it was settling a redlining case against Ameris Bank, the city will consider a bill to acknowledge redlining's history and impact. To talk about that, I'm joined now by the bill's sponsor, Jacksonville City Councilmember Jimmy Peluso. Hey, Jimmy.
Hey, Ann, how are you? Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming on. So, um, you are representative of core downtown,
hmm
and it is a district that goes Springfield, Riverside, Ortega, includes some of the wealthiest residents, I would say, in the
Yep.
city, and also some of the poorest, including Fairfax and Talleyrand and out east. Does that district make sense to you?
Well, obviously the districts were redone because of the federal lawsuit that went through. Right, our city council basically gerrymandered. They did. I'll be honest, I wasn't on council at the time. So the NAACP, Northside Coalition, ACLU all got together, and this was one of the three maps that they presented to Judge Morales. So, from the perspective of these are historical neighborhoods, I could understand it. But truly, I mean, this is a massive district with a lot of very unique needs. So it's definitely kept me awake at night,
Yeah.
running around from one part to the other. But I mean, there's definitely cohesion in a lot of ways. But you're right. I mean, what we see in Ortega are very different needs than what we see out east.
Yeah. And so, as you say, those groups sued because they they disagreed with the gerrymandered map, and the
hmm
federal judge agreed, and they basically redrew the district with the goal of creating a minority access district. But there were no people of color that ran.
Yeah, that was kind of fascinating to me as well. And so once we saw that there was, I was already running for a different seat for then the District 14 seat, which still included Ortega as well as Riverside, Avondale, and parts of Murray Hill. But yeah, once they kind of switched it over, we were already kind of mid campaign, and we saw that yeah nobody was really jumping into the race that we thought might be oh no we can't run against that person. So we just stayed in the race, and we kept true to our word and our commitment to the neighborhoods that we were fighting to win over.
And so, representing that diverse district, is that in some ways inspiring you to introduce some of this legislation that tries to redress some historical racial wrongs?
Oh, there's no question. And I'm a lover of history already, so I was already pretty familiar with redlining. But as I was campaigning in different parts of the community, so many people were saying, the consolidation hasn't done as much for us as they claimed it would, and we still have so many barriers to capital and wealth that other parts of our community and District 7 have access to. And so we knew that redlining was a part of that. I had constituents specifically saying, what are we going to do about redlining? Uh,
Remind us what redlining is.
so redlining was, after at the federal level, I think in 1938 they passed, the Federal Housing Act, and it created the Federal Housing Authority, and they provided loans backed by the federal government. But the banks that were getting access to the FHA loans were given directions on basically, hey, here's where you should be putting your loans. You should be putting them in this part of town, and definitely not this part of town. And in the documentation that shows which areas were redlined, they specifically spoke to race, and they said, don't give loans in this area. It's 100% this racial background. And even in the documentation, they say, these are areas with poor infrastructure, poor drainage, poor lighting, no sidewalks, all of these things that in 1938 they were talking about that we still see today in a lot of those communities. And it's just it's jarring for anyone to think, oh, racism's gone, we did it, it's over. 1965, we're good now. No, the sins of the past are still with us today.
And those neighborhoods were actually under the federal guidance labeled hazardous
Oh yeah, absolutely,
in terms of investment.
certainly.
And so banks didn't invest, people weren't able to get those loans.
Yep.
And so those impacts, you say, are still being felt. So what is your proposal ask to do?
So at the very least, and to to be honest, I'm trying to make sure that we have a resolution that, at the very least, starts talking about what redlining was and get the city to say, yes, this was government-sponsored racism, and we not only acknowledge we want to see a future where we can try to find a solution to what redlining has done to those communities. So we've been talking with the administration, and I know that you guys have the mayor on here every month. Make sure you kind of bring that up in future conversations. Like, hey, what is the administration? Because I don't want to jump ahead on some of the things that we've talked about with the administration. But I know that in the next budget process, we're looking to do things specifically in portions of this city where the old urban core, the old areas, in Health Zone 1, and those that were redlined, So we're going to find more dollars and more solutions and more infrastructure spending in those areas. And admittedly, I think our focus is very much there. All of City Council's aligned on that. Tonight, it's going to pass on the consent agenda, probably with everyone voting in favor. So enough individuals are now able to see what this map looks like, and they might have heard the term redlining, but now they actually know what it is.
And so, for people who don't, intimately follow how government works, this is an ordinance. I mean, this is a resolution, which means it is basically a statement as
Yes.
opposed to like something that is going to implement specific requirements.
Correct.
Is it laying the groundwork, though, for a future ordinance of some kind that would, be based on the language of this resolution?
Well, I mean, we've got 5 at-large members, and then you have several members of council who are representatives in some of these districts, and so it's frankly incumbent upon them to kind of push for ordinances and for solutions in their communities. But we know the administration, through the budget process and through their own policies, are going to be putting more and more dollars into certain areas. But I could say, like right now, for instance, tonight, also on the agenda, I have a bill that's we call it the Miracle on Myrtle. It's basically going to provide $200,000 to go towards the Durkeeville area. There's 37 lots owned by the Jacksonville Housing Authority. They are all very close to the S line. They're all very close in proximity to Myrtle itself.
I
Go
just
ahead.
want to stop for people who aren't familiar. So
Please.
Myrtle Avenue is in the area that you're talking about. The S line is what?
The S line is a part of the what's going to be the Emerald Trail. So the S line was already kind of built in. It's a pedestrian and bicycle track meant to kind of provide an additional transportation node for individuals to use, especially if you don't have a car. It's awesome. Go use the S line, but now it's going to connect directly to the rest of the Emerald Trail, the different segments that are coming online. So it's really cool because we're going to be able to connect this whole city in a different way than we ever have before.
And that Durkeeville neighborhood is a historic black neighborhood.
Absolutely.
It's also the home of J.P. Small's baseball park, which was a Negro League stadium or ballpark. So this is a Miracle on Myrtle would actually put some dollars behind city investment.
Yes.
And where is that in the process?
So tonight it's going to be voted on, and so once it passes, we're going to have about 9 to 10 months of community conversations, because these are communities where, as you kind of noted earlier, with it being a heavy minority population, I can walk into these communities and say, hey, I'm your representative, but I don't want to walk into them and say, I've got the solution for you. They've had people who look like me walk into their communities before saying, hey, here's how we're going to solve the problem, and we've seen urban renewal, we've seen buildings being torn down and nothing being brought back up. We've seen historical context being ripped away. So I don't want to be, I never want to be in that position. And I never want to be the guy who shows up thinking I know better than what the neighbors think. So I want to make sure that we have a collaborative process where they tell us what they want to do with those 37 lots. Do we want single family homes? Do we want duplexes? Do we want them to have homeowners? Do we want some to be rentals? How are we going to make that work? As well as what are we going to do for the current homes in the area that have heirs property issues, maybe have property tax issues, maybe they have liens. How do we kind of find the process to make sure that they're all able to stay within the neighborhood? Go ahead, sorry.
No, I was just going to reintroduce you. We're talking with Jacksonville City Councilmember Jimmy Peluso about a few bills that he's got on the docket in City Council, and you are welcome to join our conversation. Give us a call at 904-549-2937, or you can email us at firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, it's fine. But there's going to be a third piece to it as well. That's going to be talking about different capital improvement projects that we should be having in the area. So the CIP budget process. Sorry, I'm coughing. The CIP budget process is arguably the most. My apologies.
All right, it happens. As soon as you get in front of a microphone.
I know, right?
Yeah.
No, so the capital improvement budget is like the best part of a government budget. It is the roads, the bridges, the potholes, the streetscaping, all that stuff. So it's the real money, if you will. And so by making sure that we have projects ready to go in the hopper, we can place those in the CIP budget and actually elevate them. Oftentimes, we've got a public works department and a planning department and a budget office that are so overworked, and there's timelines on what they can do. And we've got CPACs that they're supposed to integrate with. They're supposed to talk to members of the community, talk with council members, and so sometimes you can't get projects into the CIP. This will help make sure that we do.
Right. Okay. I want to talk about another piece of legislation that you are introducing. This one is an ordinance as opposed to a resolution.
Mm-hmm.
It has to do with hate speech. So the bill itself says, between 2020 and 2022, there's been a massive increase in hate crimes. And I feel like we all sense this. But what do the data say?
Yeah, no, I mean, the first whereas clause I have in here is in November of 2023, the FBI and several Northeast Florida law enforcement agencies initiated the United Against Hate campaign to raise awareness and announce an aggressive response to crimes motivated by hatred towards individuals or entity because of their race, ethnicity, religion, sexual orientation, gender identity, disability, or national origin. Yeah, we're seeing massive increases, and we're seeing more and more entities at the federal and the state level recognizing it. You know, this is certainly a direct response to the Newtown massacre that occurred. And I sit in council chambers, and we have individuals come up multiple times, often people of color, that say, we had a shooting, it was racially motivated, what are we doing about it? This was 2 or 3 streets away from my district, but I still have portions of Newtown. I still have portions of 32209. I do have Edward Waters University in my district. The shooter went there first. And when I hear that, the last thing I want during my 4 years of office is to not make any sort of impact. People are directly asking for something, for some response to something that changed lives and changed a community. And if we're going to do nothing and just say, we're really sorry, everyone, then that's a failure on our part. This bill was really hard to get done. We had several attorneys tell us it's unconstitutional to move forward, First Amendment rights and all that. But Jason Teal stepped up when we needed him to, and he wrote an incredible bill.
General counsel.
Yes, our office general counsel. He did a great job writing this bill. So if we see another, swastika being projected, if we see individuals passing out leaflets or putting them in homes over in Murray Hill or Mandarin or whatever else, saying we should murder certain people of a certain race, now there's jail time associated with that. Now there's higher penalties and higher fees. I think it's triple the highest assessed fee for anyone who does that kind of stuff. And if somebody's got a blowhorn on the side of the road or they're waving a Nazi flag, we'll be able to arrest them now and pull them in. And go ahead, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, so, I mean, in terms of the specifics of this bill, the penalties that you talk about, one example would be if somebody put up a sign, a hate message, and the sign itself was illegal, illegally placed, say, in a right-of-way. Your bill would provide for more than one specific sign could be cited in an individual instance, right? So if somebody puts up 5 signs, they could be cited for 5 violations, as opposed to, I think in the past, it would typically be like 1 iteration, 1 fine. And so not only does it multiply how often you can get cited in a single incident, but also if it's hate related, it would be tripled, the punishment.
Yes, it would.
And so that actually makes it financially rather consequential in some of these cases.
I think that it would, right? And I mean, we're seeing folks standing in the right of ways, outside of Disney and stuff like that, still to this day. I mean, they just don't have fear, right? This individual who committed this violent crime from Clay County came up to Newtown. He had no fear of what he was doing. And he was, so many individuals clearly impacted him with hate speech. And so I can't always promise that we can stop someone on Twitter or Facebook or TikTok or whatever else, but at the very least, I can make sure that the city of Jacksonville stands up and says, we're fighting against hate, and we're going to make sure that it won't be tolerated in the public space.
And you are referring, to the Newtown massacre. A lot of people may know it better as what happened at the Dollar General, but that, of course, is an incident that claimed the lives of a 19-year-old who worked at the Dollar General, A.J. Laguerre, and a shopper there, Gerald Gallion, and a woman who was an Uber driver just waiting outside, Angela Carr, who's 52. So all 3 of those murdered in that incident last fall. So that is a starting point for this conversation in some ways in Jacksonville. But it, as you say, there's been a number of other incidents where there have been Nazis, hanging swastikas off of overpasses or projecting images on buildings. Do you feel that there is wide support on council for a bill like this?
Yeah, so I think, from what the general counsel's office told us, other members wanted to do something after Newtown. But again, there was a lot of apprehension, I think, from certain attorneys. The consequences of having a federal lawsuit, regarding the Constitution or the amendment, First Amendment, is something that could make people maybe a little bit, make people wince. We had a number of attorneys tell us, we know what you want to do. We're sorry. We just don't think, we'll be able to make something work. So I feel like a couple of other members might have said, all right, I've got other priorities I got to work on. Not to say that this isn't a major priority, but when attorneys tell you it's going to be an uphill battle, it's you only have so much time in council. But we really kind of wanted to keep on with this. We had enough constituents coming up multiple times asking the question, and so we were fortunate enough to have Jason Teal step up and do the work that he did.
We've got a call from Stanley. Good morning, Stanley. Welcome to First Coast Connect.
Yes, good morning.
Hey,
Good
Stanley.
morning to everyone, especially the city councilman. He's doing a great job. First of all, in the African American community or any community, we are not dealing with race. If you're a good politician, where you care about the people from the bottom up, race has nothing to do with it. Let me put it on the table. Number two, we are getting ready to do some fantastic things in the urban core, the North Urban Core. So I appreciate his leadership, the mayor leadership, other members of the city council leadership, and we are on the right track after 54 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Stanley. I'm going to shift gears just a little bit.
Can we have more calls like that, please?
Sure. Stanley, call back. Just on the issue of the boat, the cargo ship accident in Baltimore. I know that you're a Navy officer.
I am, yes.
And a reservist, and you worked on a number of Navy vessels. After that accident, there were, the city made a statement about there's these concrete structures called dolphins at the Dames Point Bridge, which is the bridge that really sees the only major cargo traffic go under it, these mega ships. But they don't seem that substantial. I mean, I'm curious if you think that if there should be tugboats required to kind of guide, not just, harbor pilots, but actual tugboats guiding these massive vessels. It'd be hard for bridges to withstand, obviously, the kind of force that we're talking about.
Well, I can tell you that pretty much every Navy vessel I've been on, we certainly had a tug at every moment we were going under a bridge. And I spoke about this with Councilmember Howland, Councilmember Lannon, both of which are naval officers as well. Councilmember Howland is a surface warfare officer like I am, so he and I have spent a number of times doing these sea and anchor duties. The dolphins, they were told that they could withstand a hit and that they could deter a ship. I asked the question because we did have someone from DOT come in to kind of speak to us about, hey, when we put in the dolphins, here's what they can do. I said, hey, could we add more dolphins perhaps to make sure that we definitely secure this?
Right. I mean, there are many more around the Sky Bridge
Yes.
in Tampa.
And so, he had said we could talk about that more as we move forward. So, I mean, we're going to have obviously a new legislative session next year. That's a great opportunity for us to speak with our Duval delegation to kind of see if we can get more state funding to possibly do stuff like that. Obviously, talking with Jacksport, and these are all commercial, private operators. So if they don't want to pay for a pilot or they don't want to pay for a tug, that's potentially at their discretion and their risk. But I mean, it's something that I would hope that Jacksport and for anyone who leases, the ports or the land that any of these ships dock up at, that they would say, hey, look, this is now going to be a requirement or heavily suggested.
Right. Well, Councilmember Jimmy Peluso, thanks so much for coming on. We hope to have you back soon.
Of course. Thank you, Ann.